All right. Well, Big Daddy government is getting very, very greedy for more and more power as they continue their encroachment into the private sector. Most recently, the SEC of all organizations is doing its level best to enforce this idiotic DEI policy concerning Nasdaq companies on board diversity. Let's break down this overreach with Stefan Padfield. Stefan is the deputy director of the Free Enterprise Project. Stefan, welcome to State of the Nation. And my first question to you is, what in the hell is the SEC doing, trying to push this on companies, on private companies? What is this all about?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. And I will say that this is a question a lot of people are asking. Your viewers may be aware of the fact that we have essentially appealed the case that went before the Fifth Circuit, where the court there, three democratically appointed or Democrats appointed judges sided with the SEC. We've now appealed that, and some state AGs, I think 19 state AGs, are on our side supporting en banc review. But to break it down, basically what's going on is you have the SEC supporting this rule by Nasdaq, right? So these exchange rules, we've got New York Stock Exchange, Nasdaq are basically the two biggest, and they put out their own rules that companies that want to list with them have to follow. And so Nasdaq promulgates this rule that essentially requires corporations to either have two directors that meet these diversity quotas, essentially, or at least explain why. And the SEC has to approve that rule, just like it has to approve all rules. So our suit is against the SEC, saying that it has exceeded its authorization and also violated the Constitution by basically pushing this diversity agenda. So why are they doing it? Again, it's a bit of a head scratchers. One of the most important things we would look to is whether or not this is material information. But the SEC itself, in supporting the rule, has said, we've looked at all the studies and we actually can't find a business case for these diversity measures, right? So it's basically a wash at the end of the day. Both sides have their studies that they trot out, but there's not a material case to be made that the bottom line is improved by increasing diversity when you look at all the studies in total. And you know the SEC would have wanted to support that proposition if it could. So that's off the table. It's not a material reason. So then they start citing things like, well, there's a market failure. We've got too many disclosures around ESG and diversity, so we need to step in and have a rule. Well, it's always a bit tricky when the government starts citing market failure, right? Because on the one hand, they're suggesting there's this value proposition, but somehow the market isn't answering it. And that is problematic and leads to all sorts of government interference. So those are some of the issues that are rumbling around here with this SEC support of this diversity rule by Nasdaq.
I just find it absolutely absurd that the Security and Exchange Commission is getting involved in pushing a political agenda regarding DEI. And I mean, we're seeing this all over the place. These leftists are so out of control. I loved your piece, by the way, saying, "Hey, SEC, stay in your lane." How do you think this is going to shake out? I mean, is the SEC going to prevail here, or are they going to be able to basically say, you've got to hire who we say you've got to hire, or else we're going to come after you? I mean, surely we're not there yet.
Well, let me just pick up really quickly on your use of the word absurd, because one of the things that I focused on, again, there's a number of challenges that we bring up in the legal case, but one of the things I focused on in the article that's linked to the piece that you just mentioned, which is Stay in Your Lane, which is on our site, nationalcenter.org, is basically that the rule itself, even if you buy all the sort of narrative around market failure and diversity as a value proposition, this rule itself doesn't do that, because it allows those two spots to be satisfied by self-identification, right? So, and does this expressly when it comes to the case of women. So you could literally have a 9-person board of 9 white males, and if one of them identifies as a woman and another identifies as black, because they also use self-identified when they talk about other minority criteria, that would be diverse according to this rule. So even if you accept all the other sort of justifications, this rule should not stand on that basis alone. It's just absurd on its face. And I think one of the points that I've made and others have made is it's essentially telling women we're going to solve gender equality by just bringing in men who identify as women, right? So with friends like these, who needs enemies if you're looking for women's equality? But as far as handicapping the case itself, I do think it's an uphill battle because, again, these courts give a tremendous amount of deference to these administrative agencies. We think we have some good arguments to make. There's a state action issue, right? So is the SEC, like, do our constitutional claims have legs? Is the SEC involved enough to make this state action? That's also a hard road to hoe, so to speak. So we'll have to wait and see. I do think that some of this is percolating all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we've got some cases before the U.S. Supreme Court right now that are looking to significantly rein in this deference, right, to these administrative agencies, to essentially pick where their boundaries are in terms of their authority and essentially pick what counts and doesn't for issues like, business purpose and so on. So even if this particular case that hopefully will get picked up by the entire Fifth Circuit we don't win ultimately, I think there's still some tremendous momentum towards reining in some of these agencies, including the SEC.
Yeah, because I've got to think that people are just getting well, I know anecdotally, I'm fed up with it. And I know that a lot of people, when you talk to them about this stuff, they're like, how absolutely crazy. So let me just get this straight, Stefan. So if you and I, both Caucasian dudes, and 7 other people that were all Caucasian, men, women, doesn't matter, are on this board, and we want to satisfy the SEC with this DEI BS, I could just say, you know what? I woke up today feeling like a transgender Asian woman. Bam, I'm approved, and there's diversity, right? May not be true, but I'm saying it's true just to get around this idiotic initiative. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and as written, the rule allows for these categories to be satisfied by self-identification. And I think what's really interesting about this is it is one of these examples of how the left, if you basically just leave them alone, they end up getting so radical that their propositions can't stand up under their own weight, and they essentially eat their tail. Now, those of us on the right and even center right and even mainstream really that are concerned about this radicalism, the issue is how much damage are they going to do along the way, but they've painted themselves into such a corner, right? They have a section in this rule that it basically allows for women and then other minorities, including LGBTQ, right? So you might think, well, why not just have a category for trans women, men who identify as women? But of course they can't do that because their radical ideology says trans women are women. Right. So you can't have a separate category. So it's got to be if a man identifies as a woman, that checks the woman block, and then we just go on from there. So there really is, I think, that frustration that you're talking about with both just the administrative state, the deep state generally, but then also just with this ideology, this radical leftist ideology that's baked into this. And you've got feminists basically tearing out their hair as we see all over the place now, where they've been fighting for all these women equality rights, and now they're told that, hey, if you're on the side of the leftists, you basically have to let men come into your sports, come into your locker rooms, come into your bathrooms,
exactly,
and become Woman of the Year, and you have to celebrate that.
Yeah, shut up, ladies. Everybody knows men are the best women. Yeah, it's absurd. When we come back, we got to take a real quick break just so we can get a headline in here, Stefan. But when we come back, I want to talk about some of these other. Now, we talked about the SEC, and this is crazy, and I hope you guys win this and it gets tossed like it should. But there are other major corporations and major companies that are pushing this stuff. Hello, I'm thinking of Larry Fink. I'm thinking of BlackRock. I'm thinking of Vanguard. I'm thinking of these other major corporations that are pushing this DEI stuff. So when we take a real quick break for headlines, and when we get back, Stefan, I want you to address that. We're speaking with Stefan Padfield. He's with the Free Enterprise Project, Deputy Director, and we'll be back with State of the Nation right after this headline on TNT Radio.